Hello, my name is Hakon and welcome back to my channel, all you bibliophiles today, because today I'm making a video about books and my choice of the day has been to talk a little bit about my David Attenborough collection of books. And me and David, we go way back. Actually, we go back to The Living Planet. My first memory of David Attenborough as a presenter, producer, filmmaker, naturalist is of him presenting The Living Planet on TV, which I watched when it showed the first time in 1984. I would have been old enough to watch Life on Earth 4 years earlier, but I have absolutely no memory of it, so to whatever extent I managed to get a glimpse of it, I can't remember. So my first memory of David Attenborough from The Living Planet, which is one of, I believe, the two pillars of natural history filmmaking. So Life on Earth and The Living Planet, nothing of that scope has been made before or since, and I still think they're the two greatest natural history television shows ever made. And I might say more about that some other time, but right now I'm not going to go too much into detail why I think they're better than everything that came after, but they are, and I'm going to stick to that. So the thing about David Attenborough, when I saw him the first time on TV, I really liked him because there's something about the way he carries himself, the way he talks, his enthusiasm, his knowledge, his absolute wonderful way of communicating something that could have been very complex, that I found immediately appealing, and I've absolutely loved him since. So my wife keeps saying that he's my adopted grandfather, she calls him, and I suppose in a way that is true. If I were to choose my own grandfather, I suppose I could do much worse than picking David Attenborough. So books. I'm going to talk about books today. So of course, when David Attenborough was making TV, he was also writing books. And just to talk about this a little bit chronologically now, I can't remember the exact timings of his biography now when it comes to this, but he was working as a broadcaster in the BBC. He was controller for BBC Two for quite a long time. When they started BBC Two, he was the first controller of the BBC Two. And I think this, I'm not sure if it was his idea or someone else's idea, but there was an idea to make a new kind of natural history show, or show about animals, I should say. The focus would be on the animals in this one. And it was called Zoo Quest. Zoo Quest, late 50s, mid 50s, somebody came up with the idea of making the show where you have someone from London Zoo, and of course the way they got more animals for the zoo in those days was you went on expeditions, you picked up the animals in the wild, of course you got all your permits and stuff to make sure you could do this, you took them back to your zoo and you showed them off. And this is something that had to be done regularly. You wanted new animals, you wanted, sometimes some animals would have died and without breeding, you would have to replace them. And those were different times. Of course, it seems a bit strange now, because now the main focus is to preserve animals in their habitat, preserve the habitat, and not to disturb them, try to leave them exactly where you found them. Unless there's some reason for taking them out of that habitat in order to save them, which could also be the case if the habitat is destroyed for whatever reason. But generally, the purpose of the zoo has changed, because it used to be just entertainment, something you go to, it's fascinating, you can learn something about animals. But the focus has been that the zoo's job is to raise awareness about the natural world, of course, but also about the habitat loss, about the dangers that animals face in the wild because of human encroachment, things like that. And of course, zoos also have breeding programs. They try to especially try to preserve rare breeds that may have been in zoos before they got to the brink of extinction, and they try to have breeding programs to work together with different zoos and reintroduce animals into the wild that are endangered or extinct even. So there are lots of things going on, and it's very different. The focus has changed hugely since the 1950s. And right in that 1950s setting, that's where you find David Attenborough, who was meant to be a producer and I suppose to a large extent behind the camera as well of the ZooQuest expeditions. He was not meant to present. He was meant to produce, direct, and organize things like that. So it was not no intention of his to ever be in front of the camera. Now, I can't remember the exact details because it has been a while since I've read the book now, or one of the books, and somebody fell ill. He had to take over, and it turns out that David Attenborough was an absolute natural. In front of the camera, he was amazing. I think it was the guy from London Zoo who was supposed to be the, not the star of the show, I would say the animal would be the star of the show, but he was supposed to be the one showing the star of the show to the audience, talking about it, etc. But David Attenborough, of course, he was really well read when it came to the natural world. He was interested in it from a young age. He had been reading up. He'd been reading his Darwin and everything. And so I think one of the things that his companion from the London Zoo, when they went down on one of these quests, he was quite fascinated to find that David Attenborough could go around and name all sort of trees and animals and birds, and because he knew them, he'd read about them, he'd seen pictures, etc. of them, and it had just absorbed all this material. So David Attenborough, always a natural, I think, when it comes to understanding nature, and also, as we now know, he's also a natural at explaining it to others. So that was ZooQuest, and parallel to the TV show, there were books written. So, and that was ZooQuest to Guyana, 1956. I don't know the exact timings of the TV show, but I'm just going to mention the books. ZooQuest for a Dragon, 1957, which was later expanded a little bit and retitled Quest for the Paradise Birds. Then there was a third one, which is ZooQuest in Paraguay, 1959. And then, this is a bit interesting as well, because there was a slight focus shift, and I'll get back to that in a moment. So Quest in Paradise, 1960. And you will notice there's no zoo in the title there. And this book was also titled People of Paradise on the American market. Or there was a new version that was published when it aired on TV, I think, in America. I'll get back to that. So, and then it was ZooQuest to Madagascar, and finally Quest under Capricorn. So an interesting thing about the ZooQuest expeditions, and I'm not sure if this was something that was intended. I don't think it was. I think it was something that just happened organically. That in order to get the animals that they wanted, they had, from London Zoo, they had like a shopping list of animals they wanted. Many of them were rare. They sort of knew where they would find them, and they had to go to all these quite remote places. And some of the places they went, the reason they knew to go there was because there might have been a station, some British person living there who knew the area, who could be a guide and also a liaison with the local people, etc. But I think this is something that just happened then by itself, that David Attenborough found the exposure to these different cultures and people hugely fascinating. And so a lot of the focus and more of the focus of the books got to be not so much on the animals, but on the people and their cultural expressions. There's mentions of music, there's mentions of rituals, and other things. And this became a whole thing in itself, that he also explored a little bit later as well in some of his other work. Although the focus, of course, went back to natural history pretty much full time with Life on Earth in 1979. But before that, his focus actually moved more and more towards the ethnography, the talking about the people and the cultures. And I found that quite interesting. And of course, those aspects of it is something that I appreciate a lot more now than I would have done back in the early 80s, when I first heard about David Attenborough. I wouldn't have been as interested in that, but now I think that human culture is a hugely fascinating and complex subject, and anything about anything written and filmed and photographed about it from a time when so much was in the process of becoming lost is hugely valuable, and David Attenborough actually contributed a bit to that particular field as well. So, all in all, there was 6 canonical books, I would say, from these early days, the ZooQuest expeditions. So it's and I don't have any of the original editions of these. But later, omnibus editions were published and republished over and over again. And so my first edition, I'll just move my camera to the desk in a moment, is this one, the ZooQuest Expeditions. I'll just change my view. So this one is an omnibus edition of the first 3 books of the ZooQuest Expeditions. So this is ZooQuest to Guyana, ZooQuest for a Dragon, and ZooQuest in Paraguay. So the first 3 books in the ZooQuest series. And these are slightly abbreviated, apparently, from the original text of the original books. So I'm not sure how much is missing, because I actually haven't been able to, I don't have any of the original books, and I haven't therefore been able to compare. I'm not too fussed, because I'm quite sure that this probably covers all the most important stuff. But at some point, perhaps, if I were to expand my David Attenborough collection now, it might be with those early books in their full editions. But otherwise, I feel I'm quite well covered now. So, really like this one. Lots of nice photos, and of course here you can see the ethnographic focus already. He's taking pictures of cave paintings, as also how it relates to the animal world. There's a sloth there, and a giant anteater apparently. So, and here is a very young David Attenborough as well. So yeah, it's a very good book, lots of nice photos, and many of the photos are not of animals, but of people. So I'm already in these early days, even though the main focus of the expedition was supposed to be the animals, the books have become quite a bit about the people, which I really like that change of focus. So, nice book, and this is a book club association edition. So it wouldn't have been the first hardback omnibus edition. There would have been an earlier one than this. I'm not too fussed about that. Now, another thing about me, by the way, I'm not a book collector by any means. I buy books because I want to read them mainly. So, or look at them, or inside them, or I should say. Like this one, of course, I have read this book in a different edition. I might just want to leaf through it and relive that experience. So I'm not too fussed about first editions, about trying to find the ones in the best possible condition. or I'm not a completionist that wants all kinds of editions, but I do like, with David Attenborough, is one of the few cases where I do actually like having different editions, because they are slightly, sometimes there's different text, there's different photos, there's different, yeah, so there are differences. And all of them I've found in charity shops. I don't go around just buying them willy-nilly. I don't buy the new ones, new reprints, of which there aren't that many these days. There are newer editions of this. I'll get back to that in a moment. Because actually, just to go through the new edition again. So this one was published a few years ago. This is Adventures of a Young Naturalist. It's been retitled now, the ZooQuest Expeditions. That's exactly the same as this one, really. But the pictures are smaller. The paper is more the usual recycled paper. Not as satisfying a book, but this is the one I read, because this is the first one I got. So, yeah. Then the next three books in the ZooQuest Expeditions have also been published as an omnibus edition. But interestingly, of course, the focus was moving so much towards the people. This one is called Journeys to the Past. And clearly the focus is now ethnographical rather than animal. So, and again, lots of lovely photos. He talks about here about the cargo cults, for instance, and other things. Pygmies and dancing birds, this chapter is called. So obviously he's talking about animals as well as people, but of course there's a lot of focus on the people. So that's hugely interesting. And this is an early omnibus edition. I'm not sure if it might actually be the first one. Let's see. This is from 1981, and it cost a princely sum of £10 in 1981. And I don't know if you have any perspective on that, but that is a lot of money in 1981. But the omnibus edition of that I read was this paperback version. Or actually, it looks like I'm actually reading it. I haven't actually finished reading it yet. I've started reading it. I've got a bookmark here. So I need to finish reading this, and I might swap to reading this one, which I acquired quite a bit later than this one. So, of course, this is a handier size, but you do get shortchanged with the small pictures again in this one, although you do have some in color as well. Or it might be colorized. I'm guessing this probably is a colorized picture, unless it's it could be, yeah, I'm not sure if it's colorized or if it's it could be a color still from the film camera. I don't know. In any case, these are the last three ZooQuest Expedition books. So it's Quest in Paradise, ZooQuest to Madagascar, and Quest under Capricorn. I also actually have some of these on audiobook. I'm not going to talk too much about audiobooks. I could have shown you the tapes, but I did get a good deal on some audiobook tapes as well, because some of these are not available as audiobooks at the moment. So I was quite happy to find some older tapes that I could record from. So that is the first 6 books by David Attenborough covered in these omnibus volumes. The next book after that is one I don't really know much about. It's called Fabulous Animals. I don't have that one. I think it's mostly a picture book with not so much text, but I don't really know so much about it. The next book I do have, which is entirely ethnographical, and this is one that might not be on everyone's radar, is called The Tribal Eye. by David Attenborough. And this is actually about art, tribal art, in fact. So this would also have been a little TV series. They're all TV series, these ones. And this one is about, well, tribal art, as it says right there on the tin. And it's I have not read this one yet, but it's one of those that you can easily miss. And also it's easy to miss simply because the dust jacket that's what it looks like. It's very anonymous on the shelf. You might actually walk straight past it in a charity shop and not even notice it. David Attenborough, small type, Tribal Eye, small type on the side there. So yeah, interesting book, I think. This is the kind of stuff that I'm also very interested in. So, and the next one after Tribal Eye, David Attenborough's focus started moving back towards natural history again, and what I think is probably the best, I would actually put this above Living Planet, Life on Earth, the best TV show ever, pretty much, I think. Best documentary TV show ever, I should say. Now, actually, I technically got 4 editions of this, because I also, a few years ago, I bought this box set called the Life Trilogy, which has Life on Earth, Living Planet, and Trials of Life in the paperback editions. So before the paperback editions, and of course there were also hardback editions that were very similar to those paperback editions. I'll just move these aside for now. This is not the standard edition of Life on Earth. I don't actually have the hardback standard early edition of Life on Earth, but because I have prioritized in my shopping of David Attenborough to get the extended editions if I can. Reader's Digest published augmented and enlarged edition of Life on Earth, Living Planet, and Trials of Life as well. So all those 3 in the Life series. Reader's Digest had expanded editions. They are bigger, proper coffee table volume sized. For some strange reason, although I do have a theory as to why, this particular book you hardly ever find with a dust jacket. And I think the reason is people don't like the dust jacket. I mean, it's got this big blotchy box here, which sort of ruins it a little bit. This should be on the back or the inside cover. And if you take the dust jacket off, it looks much nicer. So my theory is that people have just been throwing away the dust jackets because it doesn't look as nice as the book without. Which is a bit of a shame, I suppose, for the ones who are bothered by that sort of thing. I'm not bothered by dust jackets being there or not. If I can get a good deal on a book without a dust jacket, I'm happy. But since I did find it with a dust jacket, I went with that one. And this is a format I think is quite suited to this kind of content. You get plenty of space for the text, you get plenty of space for the photos, and this is an absolutely beautiful, wonderful book. And this is also the book that I always keep this on audiobook. And this is one that I've listened to several times on audiobook, and actually it's one of those things, if I have trouble sleeping, one of the things I can do, which always works, is to put on Life on Earth audiobook by David Attenborough, and I get his lovely voice in my ear, and I can sleep really well. But I also like listening to it without sleeping and enjoying the content. And there's something about Life on Earth, it's just so perfectly structured, I think, as a narrative. It's taking different aspects of Life on Earth, how it is came to be the way it is, the sort of the first, from the first tiny single-celled organisms to bigger animals, and how the forests, the insects, the water, the land, etc., etc. And it's sort of chronological, while at the same time, of course, the examples that can be used for each step in the evolution of life can also be exemplified by animals that exist today. And this is one of the wonderful things about the way the story is told. It ties together both the evolution and the present. And it's just something about the way this is structured that feels so compelling to me. And it's much better structured than the book version of Living Planet. And Living Planet, I do prefer to watch the TV shows. Life on Earth, I think I actually prefer reading the book or listening to the audiobook. Perfect natural history writing there in Life on Earth. So this is the augmented and enlarged edition. In addition to that, I do have, this would be very close to the original hardback copy, except it's much smaller. So the Book Club Association published these sort of miniature pocket editions of David Attenborough's books, certainly the Life series, and smaller text. Still the pictures get quite good prominence. Very nice if you want sort of a handy size for carrying around and reading. Still an absolutely beautiful book, quality paper, because it's got color photos in it. And let's see what it says here. This is from this edition from 1980, reprinted 1986. So yeah, so this is was published quite early on. So this is identical in that case to the larger. So there would be a larger edition of this that probably would be about that size and otherwise look quite similar. So, but this one, I just found this in a charity shop, £1.50. I couldn't leave it. I had to get this. And of course, I already showed you the similar one of the Living Planet as well. Right, so that's Life on Earth. Now, there's one more thing about Life on Earth. I hadn't actually heard about this until recently. That there was actually, in addition to the augmented and expanded version, there's actually a simplified version called Discovering Life on Earth. And this is one I haven't had a proper look at yet because I only bought it recently. It's the same thing, but it's been simplified in order that children can understand it even better. Now, when it comes to David Attenborough, I wouldn't have thought it was truly necessary to make a children's version of something, because the way he communicates something is so clear that it seems superfluous. But somebody thought it was a good idea to make a version that was even more child-friendly, and they came up with this. I've not actually had a proper look at it yet, so I can't tell you too much about it, but it's a wonderful book. It looks like the pictures might be slightly different, which I found intriguing as well. So that is Discovering Life on Earth, one that also probably goes under the radar for lots of people, but it's yeah. Right, so what is next after Life on Earth? And that is the Living Planet. So I already showed you this one, and I also have the augmented edition, and I have the standard edition as well. And of course here you can actually see the difference. It's also the thickness is, so I'm not sure if this is, it doesn't indicate, usually it would say if there's an abridgment. It doesn't say that this is abridged. I think it's just everything about it is smaller. Let's have a look at the text size. You can see it is just smaller. Actually, it would be interesting to see if I can just find a page in both books and see if it's identical. Where are we? The sky above. It's not entirely, probably. Or maybe it is. Okay, so this is page 170 from both books, and I can see the text doesn't match up, but it almost matches up. Yes, just a slightly difference in where it's this one starts from it, so it's just a difference in, so it looks like it actually is identical, just smaller, even to the point where the page numbers are the same. That is quite interesting as well. So it's just a smaller edition, which, so I call it the pocket edition, the pocket David Attenborough. Okay, so the Living Planet, and of course I also have the paperback edition from the box set. Now another thing about especially Life on Earth is that in later editions there were additions made. I'm not sure if that's the case for the Living Planet. I'm just going to have a little look at this one now, because this is quite a bit later. Yeah, it doesn't indicate anything there. I can say the glue isn't very happy in this one. You can hear that. Because in my audiobook version is one from Audible, and it has been updated with later scientific discoveries and information such as DNA, genetics, that sort of thing. So I don't think that would need to be the case for the Living Planet, but for Life on Earth, later editions would have been augmented a little bit to reflect that, and it really flows. I mean, Life on Earth is such a well-written book, but even though they've made additions later, they flow really well with the text. It doesn't feel like it's just plastered on. It flows onto, the text flows into it. It really works. So Living Planet, I'm just going to have a look at the enlarged edition, which I bought for a princely sum of £4 in Oxfam. And this was before Oxfam started overpricing their books. I don't know if you have noticed, but I've noticed that they've started pricing their books sometimes a lot higher than a normal second-hand bookshop would. So something like this now would probably cost, I'm guessing, £12 in Oxfam. Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. So lovely edition again. Of course, with this size you can do things like having a huge picture here. Not a big fan of pictures that go across the middle, but there you go. It still looks wonderful, and it's yeah, it's a wonderful coffee table book, and I like having these big augmented and enlarged ones as my sort of main reading copy, I would say, of these books when it is available. Let's see, I'll just try to move this out of the way here. Then, interestingly, there is a book that I think also goes under people's radars. Now, the first time I came across this was in a charity shop. I never heard of this one before, but I came across this book, and it's called The First Eden. And I think this is also hard to find if you want to watch it as well. It's hard to find on DVD and hard to find online. I'm not sure. I've tried at some point. I couldn't find it, and I just gave up. But this is one of my favorite David Attenborough books, I would say, because what this talks about is, well, actually it says right here on the front, the Mediterranean world and man. So again, this is historical, ethnographical, but it also talks about how wildlife and the changing natural world has affected man's relationship both with himself, with his own culture expansion and evolution, as well as relationship with animals because of those things. And it goes all the way back to the filling in of the Mediterranean basin. Of course, it used to be just a dry hollow. The whole of the Mediterranean, if you can imagine that, was a big, big valley. And this is a riveting read, actually. It's so many interesting things in this book, both the description and history of how the Mediterranean was filled in, and especially I like the bits about man's relationship with bulls, which is very interesting because you see so many things of that. The Minoan civilization, of course, the way they have paintings about people jumping the bulls, and you have bull mummies. You have, of course, the bullfighting, which is one of the last sort of remnants of that old worship of this absolutely godlike, powerful creature that was the aurochs in prehistoric and early historic times. So I've had this paperback, that's the one I read, but also not that long ago I also found this in Oxfam, which was still sensibly priced at the time at £1.99. I'll just remove the price tag. I don't like keeping the price tags on. I usually, when I buy books in charity shops, I clean off the books and just get the price tags off. So I still haven't had a proper look at the hardback version of this, but it looks much nicer than the paperback because I got all the big lovely pictures. And because I've read this book, again, this is one of those coffee table things, isn't it? Is you can take the book, you can leaf through it, look at the pictures, read a little bit, and enjoy it in that kind of way. The coffee table way of enjoying a book, with a cup of coffee, perhaps as well. Very interesting book. I'll just have a look at the. So this is first edition, 1987, and this is a first edition. Because this has been a bit off the radar, it probably wasn't reprinted, so it might be that it's there aren't that many of them around. This is 1989 and also a first edition, so it is possible there were only one edition of these printed. So this one is a little bit harder to find if you're looking for this one, but it's really worth it if you can find it. It's really interesting read. After that, the next major TV series and books was Trials of Life, and the sort of last in the Life trilogy, as it can sometimes seems to be considered. And I have that in my, of course, my paperback box set, and also in the augmented, expanded edition. It says here it completes the trilogy that began with Life on Earth. And this is one that I think went a little bit under my radar when it came out. When it was aired, I should say. Trials of Life, 1990, so we're talking 11 years after Life on Earth. And I think I missed this one when it was on TV. But the focus here is, of course, on the different aspects of a single life of an animal. So Life on Earth, it's the evolution of life on Earth. Living planet, it's the natural conditions of the planet and how they affect life. And then in this one, it is the life of a single animal, the different aspects of it. And it says arriving, growing up, finding food, hunting, escaping, etc., etc. So again, it's very comprehensive within and well structured within what kind of story it's trying to tell. And again, this is a story that isn't really told in any of those two previous works. But what you will notice is, of course, that many of his later, of David Attenborough's later TV shows, often go into different aspects of these subjects that are tried to be expressed in a comprehensive way in this particular volume. So that's one that I haven't really given a good look yet, and I haven't watched it properly yet. So that's another thing I should be doing probably before I read the book, is to actually watch the show. And then another 4 years passed until we got something that perhaps had been missing from the equation a little bit, because we've been talking about animals so much, that this is something that, again, Oxfam, sensibly priced Oxfam book. Something that hadn't been covered much. And this is also something that couldn't really be done before as well. 1994, there were significant advances in filmmaking. And that's another thing, of course. Many of David Attenborough's shows, the later ones, have been using advances in filmmaking that have allowed them to create a different visual perspective on things. And one thing that The Private Life of Plants introduced to natural history filmmaking is time-lapse. Some of the setups used for the TV show, the time-lapse setups, actually took years of work and filming to create time-lapse, so you could actually see the plants move almost as if they were animals, and how they interact with each other, how they grow, etc., etc., in a time scale that makes sense to human beings as you watch it. And I think that's changes your perspective on plants hugely and makes it interesting. So this is a book. I haven't actually opened it yet. You can see actually it's quite stiff. It hasn't been, this is an unread book, you can sort of tell. And I really enjoyed that TV show as well, because it's so different, and again, it's quite comprehensive when it comes to talking about plants. But this is like the Trials of Life, but the plant version of Trials of Life. So they've got traveling, feeding and growing, flowering, social struggle, living together, and surviving. So you've got all these sort of similar kind of structure to Trials of Life, which, as I mentioned earlier, is sort of becoming the template for a lot of the David Attenborough TV shows after The Living Planet. Because the thing is about Living Planet and Life on Earth is, you've done it once, it doesn't actually make that much sense to do it again, because it is so comprehensive. Whereas going through different aspects of a single life, as in Trials of Life, makes more sense when you are filming, I think. And then after that, which I also really enjoyed, but there was something, Life of Birds. I quite liked watching this, but there was something about the structure of the filmmaking I didn't like about Life of Birds. Because they were starting to do something that I find very annoying with your National Geographic kind of documentaries. So in the beginning of an episode, David Attenborough says what he's going to talk about in this episode, and then at the end of the episode he says what he's going to talk about in the next episode, which is fine, but it was too long. So he spent too much time saying what he was going to say, then he said it, and then he spent too much time saying what he was going to say next, and it felt a bit, yeah, too much. Life of Birds had a lot of interesting information about birds that I didn't know, so that's one reason why I really like it. And again, a lot of these things are the trials of life kind of template again. To fly or not to fly, of course, that's an evolution thing in this case. Mastery of flight, insatiable appetite, so eating, meat eaters, fishing, so different kinds of birds, what they eat, signals and songs, finding partners, demands of the egg, etc. So it's a lot of the same kind of thing, trials of life kind of concept. Birds, hugely fascinating, of course, or as we might know them today, of course, more and more the term avian dinosaur is thrown around because birds have been reclassified as dinosaurs in modern zoology. This book, actually, interestingly, I used to have this one back in Norway, but it's one of those that didn't make it all the way across the water when I moved last. Then, 4 years later, and now we're into 2002, you have The Life of Mammals. Again, Oxfam, £2.49, thank you, before they overpriced things. It's nice too. I really like charity shops for buying books. It's I used to, for quite a long time, the only things I went into a charity shop for was to look at the books. No, I mean, not to look at the books. To look for David Attenborough books, specifically. I was not looking to buy that many other books for a few years, until a few years ago I started reading more again, and of course now I'm looking for other things. And my David Attenborough collection is rather comprehensive, I think, and certainly to my satisfaction. So, Life of Mammals, again, trying to do the same as Life of Birds, but of course now you're also in that sort of trials of life thing, but also trying to talk about different groups of mammals. So insect hunters, chiselers, so your rodents, plant predators, plant predators is such a strange term, isn't it? That's not the standard term, of course, for a plant eater, but plant predators. I think he wanted to change the term a little bit, because an interesting aspect of animals that eat plants is that you might think of them as eating something that's just passively there for them to eat. But plants do try to fight back, just like and to avoid being eaten. So there's still a sort of a kind of an arms race, just like there is with normal predator and prey interaction between plants and plant eaters. And I think that was one of the things he wanted to actually express in this one that hadn't really truly been expressed anywhere before. So, Life of Mammals, and yeah, it's such a charming picture at the back there, I think, with the meerkats. And the next one after that, he actually published a different book. See if I can find. Oh, yes. I suppose he'd got to a point in his life where starting to write biographies made sense. So the next book after that, 2002 again, is Life on Air. And I've got two different ones here. I've got the paperback and the hardback. That was not really my intention. This one I picked up in a charity shop in a basket that said 10p. So this one cost me 10 pence to buy. Of course, I definitely couldn't go past that one. Unread, mint condition. But then later I found this one in another charity shop, and I thought I really like having the hardbacks. In this case, it's because I've got the Oxfam. Oh, now Oxfam prices have gone up now, so this one is £7. I thought that was worth it because I just really wanted this book. And it's got a lot of his life story. I have not read this one yet. So that is one that I will get to at some point. But I think it's worth £7. Don't you think it's worth £7? Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. Now, the thing I like about the hardbacks is, of course, that you got all the pictures are bigger. I mean, they might be here, but they would be smaller. It looks like there might be, it definitely looks like there's more pictures in the hardback than there are in the paperbacks. Only got these, got 2 sections of pictures here, whereas this one's got pictures all the way through. You can see the grey there on the edge of the paper, so you're actually missing out quite a bit in the paperback. For the reading purposes, of course, the paperback will make a lot of sense. Excuse me while I have a sip of water. All this talking. As if you have been following my channel, you know that my voice is a little bit fragile when it comes to talking a lot. I need to hydrate every now and again. So that is Life on Air. Wonderful title, of course, for a book, especially sort of the life moniker that sort of become associated with David Attenborough. And a really good picture of him there as well. I quite like that one. Yes. Then, next one after Life on Air was Life in the Undergrowth. And I did mention before that technology was one of those things that David Attenborough was hugely fascinated, I would say is hugely fascinated by advances in technology that allows him to tell a story that before couldn't be told. I think also in Life of Mammals, if I don't remember incorrectly, is one where they made a lot more use of night vision cameras than before, because night vision technology had advanced hugely since the 80s. In the 80s, if you had night vision, it would be super grainy, you couldn't really see anything. And once you got into the noughties, night vision technology, you could get really nice sharp pictures, you could actually see details. And I think they might have had cameras inside burrows, things like that for animals, and it's just able to show things in a new way. And another advance in camera technology was these absolutely minuscule pinhead lenses that allowed you to show both something up close that was really small, as well as keeping the background sharp enough that you actually can see the small thing in the perspective of the large thing. And this is one of those things that prompted, I think, the making of Life in the Undergrowth, because it was now possible to show the world of tiny, tiny animals and insects in the way that hadn't been done before. This is another one where I've only seen the TV show. I have not read the book yet. And it's beautiful with the bioluminescence there in the cave. So that is another of those fascinating books that I am going to read at some point. Right. And then the next book after that is called Life in Cold Blood. This is actually one of the few that I don't have that really should be part of my collection. So Life in Cold Blood is like Life of Birds or Life of Mammals. It's that trials of life kind of thing, and different groups of animals within reptiles that he goes through. So that's the reptile version of Life of Mammals and Life of Birds. So also quite interesting. And I do remember I watched most of that when it was on TV, so I think I've got a good overview of that, but I have not read the book, and I haven't actually found the book in my journeys through charity shops. It is on my shopping list still. And then I don't have the books, but he's also got books called After Life in Cold Blood, 2007. He got more biographical. So there's life stories and new life stories. So there's two books with further stories. And of course, these are very often anecdotes. And these are really lovely anecdotes as well. Excuse me. Excuse me again. From David Attenborough's life. I do have them on audiobook. So oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I was drinking too fast earlier. I'm not sure if you could hear that, but I was actually making some small burps. As I usually say to my wife when she burps, not me, better out than in. Anyway, so life stories. And then he has a book written with someone else called Drawn from Paradise, The Discovery, Art and Natural History of the Birds of Paradise. I'm not familiar with this one, but I presume it's, of course, he has talked about Birds of Paradise before, but the focus then is, of course, the discovery, art and natural history of them, and that is co-written with Errol Fuller. And then after that it's the reissues of the ZooQuest expeditions, which are the paperback, the smaller versions. I showed you the modern versions I showed you earlier, and then a book written with Stephen Moss. I've noticed that, of course, some of the last few ones is co-written. It's not quite the same to me. It doesn't appeal to me as much as the books that he has. I'm just going to change my view now. I just realized as much as the ones that he has written himself. Oh, and then suddenly when I changed my view, I also changed my view of my Wikipedia entry where I'm actually looking up these years. And then there's the last book, which is, of course, A Life on Our Planet. That's the one you probably would have heard of as well if you from 2020, and this is, of course, where he talks more about how human beings on Earth have changed it to the detriment of the natural world, of course. When it comes to particularly this aspect of David Attenborough's filmmaking, what he said about it, etc., etc., I think that he's been perhaps too careful a lot of the time in expressing what the problem is. The thing about David Attenborough is very diplomatic. I don't think he wants to name any names because it would be at the risk of losing the platform he has. So what he usually says is that this and that is destroying the habitat, but there are things that we can do. Things like that. He doesn't name any names. He doesn't put any blame anywhere. He doesn't mention the oil industry. He doesn't, etc., etc. Which is a little bit unfair, and I think that's something that's very unfair about a lot of the rhetoric about global warming and other environmental issues, is that a lot of the responsibility for doing something is put on individuals who, as individuals, have very little impact on it compared to the people who are actually responsible. I'm not going to say too much about that right now because it's slightly annoying to talk about sometimes, but there you go. Maybe that's a subject for another day. Maybe I'll make I'm not good at ranting, but maybe if we were to make a ranting video, maybe I would make it about that. In any case, I feel that David Attenborough, of course, has the kind of platform and clout where he could have been talking more about it. I can sort of see why he won't, but yeah, it is what it is. And I think that is actually my... Oh, there's one I'm missing. I'm missing one thing. I'm missing one book because that was actually not on the list I'm looking at. Okay. Which means it's so under the radar that actually it's not even on it's not in the Wikipedia entry for his bibliography. There you go. And that is this one, First Life. I'm going to change my view now. Okay, so this book is, I didn't know this book existed because it's not in the Wikipedia entry, and I was using the Wikipedia entry to check what I was looking for. But of course, this is not actually his book, which is why it's off the radar. But this is actually, you will notice there are several books that are sold like this. It's David Attenborough's First Life. That's the name of the TV show. But it's written by Matt Kaplan. And the introduction is by David Attenborough. Now, they will find other books that are, that's why it's not on the Wikipedia entry, obviously. Because it's not his book. But they are using his name to sell the book. It's, I mean, you look at this and you think, oh, David Attenborough, not Matt Kaplan. But this is a hugely interesting TV show because it's taking you back to a time. So, you know, you have Walking with Dinosaurs. I'm quite sure most of you would be familiar with that particular TV show. This, in many ways, is going back even further than that, to a time when the distinction between plant and animal life didn't exist. So this is one of the earliest animals that would have existed, is this thing which looks like a plant and it's growing on the bottom. Yeah, things like that. And then it's moving forward in time. It's looking at fossils. It's trilobites. You've got trilobites. You've got other things here. I really liked watching this particular TV show, and I'm not sure about the book because it's not written by David Attenborough, but I found it and I thought, oh, I might as well get that for my collection as well. Even though it's not written by him, it's still related, I think. So, but that might be the only one I get that isn't actually written by him, because it is for a TV show that feels like it is by David Attenborough, rather than something where he is just doing the narration, like Planet Earth or Blue Planet, which makes a difference, I think. So I don't really have an interest so much in getting the books, for the companion books for Planet Earth, or the other ones that have been made, Planet Earth 2 and Blue Planet, etc. Because one of the reasons I like the David Attenborough books is because they are by David Attenborough. I like the way he writes, and I enjoy reading. It's one of the few non-fiction things I really enjoy reading is David Attenborough. So that actually concludes my tour, I think, of my David Attenborough books. And Life in Cold Blood, pretty much the only thing that I feel is missing from my collection. Otherwise, it is very comprehensive. There's going to be hours of nice viewing for me, just sitting at the in a comfy chair and just leafing through some of these books, looking at the pictures and reading a bit. And yeah, I just really like anything David Attenborough. So, was there anything else I wanted to tell you today while I was at it? I can't think of anything right now. So, yeah. Ah, yes, now see here, by the way, just incidentally, I was on the same wiki page as the bibliography, that he wasn't, the BBC Two was in 1965 onwards, so Zoo Quest Expeditions was before he was controller of BBC Two, which means he was still doing his old job of producing programs for BBC One. So that was his thing. Yeah, okay, so I think I'll leave that for now, and I hope you enjoyed this little view of David Attenborough books, and the ones that I found. I really quite like these cute little ones, the Book Club Association ones, because it means like it's easier to bring with you when you want to have a bit of David Attenborough to read. So, and I was quite chuffed that I found actually my two favorites in that particular format. Quite fortunate. I didn't even know they existed when I saw them in the charity shop. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoy this, you know what to do. Really, I'm not gonna lecture you on my recommendations for trying to promote my channel if you enjoy my content. So thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.